Perry Marshall is one of the most expensive business strategists in the world. He's endorsed in Forbes and Inc. magazine and has authored 8 books. At London's Royal Society, he announced the world's largest science research challenge, the $10 million Evolution 2.0 prize. His reinvention of the Pareto principle is published in Harvard Business Review, and his Google book laid the foundations for the 100 billion pay-per-click industry. He has a degree in engineering and lives with his family in Chicago. Perry, welcome to the Soar to Success podcast. I'm so excited to have you with me today.
Thank you, Pat. Based on what we talked about a minute ago, this is really going to be a great conversation.
Yes, I'm so delighted to share about your book, the new book, Memos from the head office. So tell me, how did that book come about and where did the title come from?
Well, the title came from, I had a very good friend who died about 10 years ago, and he was an irreligious guy, but his wife was a very spiritual person. And one day, his wife, Vicky, had told him something. It was like, tell Perry, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And it was like the idea was she was praying, she got a message and wanted him to pass it along to me. And he goes, oh yeah, Vicky gets memos from the head office. And this was just his way of describing it. And I thought, well, I don't really know how it works that Tom doesn't really believe in this stuff, even though his wife is like, he knows that something is going on. Yeah. But that is a great phrase. And I really like it. It doesn't feel like an imposition of, it doesn't have the baggage of God spoke to me and told you, yeah. Because the word God has so much baggage. Yes. And so that's how the phrase came about. How the book came about, well, it came about because I got 2 memos right in a row in 2003 that pretty much created the life that I'm in now. Mm-hmm. So I believe we had a conversation earlier about one of my other books, but I have a book. I have a book called 80/20 Sales and Marketing.
Yes.
And the birth of that was in 2003. I read Richard Koch's 80/20 book, which every business person ought to read that book. Mm-hmm. And I suddenly realized this was way bigger than I ever realized 80/20 was. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm an engineer. I'm a geek, total like propeller head, pocket protector, calculator kind of guy. And I thought, wait a minute, this is a math formula. 80/20 is fractal. It's a pattern and pattern and a pattern. There's a math formula for that. What is it? And I could not find anything on the internet that was like what I was looking for. And so I started working on it and I was just stuck. And this one day, it was a Friday morning, I was working on this and I just wasn't getting anywhere. And I was like, how do you solve this? And I was obsessing about it all day long one day on a Friday. And the other thing I was obsessing about was I had 3 days before had one of those caveman discovers fire moments. Yeah. As an entrepreneur. I had done something that had produced a bunch of cash. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of astonished. And I think most successful entrepreneurs have had one of those moments. And I was like, my brother-in-law has got this project in Mozambique, which is the 18th poorest country in the world. And they've got an AIDS hospice and a feeding program and a school and a church and all these things. How could I help my project? Wow, I just caveman discovered fire. And so I was thinking about these 2 things all day long. And I hadn't talked to anybody about this, but there was this music thing at church on a Friday night. And so I go and they're playing this Pink Floyd kind of music, and I'm in La La Land, and I'm thinking about calculus and Mozambique, and I'm just lost in thought. And I look up, and this woman is making a beeline for me. She's African American. I've never seen her in my life. I have no idea who she is. And she sticks out her hand and she just says, "Hi, my name is Vivian, and the Lord gave me a word for you." Now, I've heard of things like this happening. I've never had this happen to me. I thought, oh, okay, this should be kind of interesting. And she says, "The Lord told me that you're very good at math, and you're working some kind of equation, some kind of formula, some kind of invention, and you're going to figure it out. Just keep working on it. You're going to figure it out."
How did she?
Like I said, I've never had anything like this happen to me. And I looked around and I thought, I did math. And the math was, what are the chances that anybody in this room at all is working on a math problem? And what are the chances she picked the right guy out of the crowd the first time?
Yeah.
So my mind is blown. And she turns to walk away, and then she spins around and she goes, "Oh, and he told me something else. You want to support missions, and God is going to bless your business so you can support missions." And now she really had me.
Yeah.
Twice in a row. And I have not talked to anybody about this. I haven't spoken a word about this math formula to anybody. And I just stared at her and I was almost in tears. And I said, "If only you knew." And she goes, "He knows," and walked away. And I stood there and I was like, did that just happen? That really happened. That objectively, factually just happened. Oh my word. So I got two messages out of that. The first message was, well, I guess you should keep working on that math formula, which I did. And I would get stuck and I would come back to it and get stuck. I did figure it out 3 years later. It's the backbone of my 80/20 book. It's really the backbone of everything I teach in my business community. And it was published in Harvard Business Review 3 years ago. And the other message I got out of that was, it's okay to succeed. Take your foot off the brake and expect things to grow. And later that summer, my business started growing. And after a couple of years, it had 4x, 5x. And I was getting invited to speak all over the world. And the topic was Google ads. And I figured out that what had happened 3 days before I met Vivian, somebody had asked me, who do I get to speak on Google ads for my seminar? I gave him a name. The guy turned him down and he came back to me and said, "Perry, I think you should speak on Google AdWords at my seminar." And I said yes. And I knew that if I'm going to be on the speaking circuit, you don't get paid to speak hardly ever in the marketing space. You get to sell something.
Yeah.
And so, okay, I need a book, I need a course. And I started putting this together. And I released the definitive guide to Google AdWords in the summer of 2003, which happens to be right when the affiliate craze of affiliate marketing with Google ads hit. And all of a sudden, Google started going supernova. And you have to remember that in 2003, Google was not the 800-pound gorilla.
Right.
They were just this weird search engine that was all white and didn't have cell phone ads. And it was one of many, Alta Vista, Hotbot, Yahoo. And so like all of a sudden I was on this magic carpet ride. And so first Google really, okay, and then 80/20, but actually 80/20 was how I figured out Google. And then eventually I was like, I think other people would want to know this. And I became much more known for my 80/20 work, I would say now, than the pay-per-click. So I got a Facebook book and a Google book. And so this one, I mean, I bet this conversation with Vivian lasted no more than a minute. on a Friday night from some woman who I've never seen in my life. She'd never been there before. In fact, there was a guy who knew her that kept bugging her, come hear my son play the guitar. She's like, okay, right? She didn't even want to be there. And this completely changed my life. And so to fast forward to the book, so skipping a lot of details, 10 years later, I actually met Vivian and figured out who she was after all of this stuff had happened. Like, I don't know who this woman was. I know her first name. I know this guy that says he knows her. I finally found her and we became friends. And I said, well, I got an idea. I've got this membership. I've got all these clients and people that are learning marketing. Let's do a webinar for my members where I get you and this other gal, and let's give people memos. And it's like literally Jack H, go. And they will give a memo to Jack H. And then they'll go to Susie Q. And then Susie Q gets a memo. And they don't know anything about these people. They haven't researched them. They don't even know who they are. Let's try that and see what happens. And so we did. And people are typing in the chat box. They're like, oh my goodness, like these people are reading my mail. Like, how is this possible? But more importantly, it wasn't about impressing people that somebody could do that. It was about encouraging people, because the entrepreneurial journey is a lonely road and it is a hard road. I think it's kind of like Lord of the Rings when Frodo has to like go through swamps and spiders and and like all this kind of stuff. And your regular friends don't appreciate this. And you can't complain to them about your rogue employee who's jacking everything up. And you can't complain about your $400,000 tax bill if you happen to be really successful. And a memo session would be a place where people can get the encouragement and insight and like a secret decoder ring maybe on a particular day of, oh, here's how I solve this problem. And so we tried this and people really, really liked it. And so we made it a regular thing. And so now right now we have 11 of these sessions every month. Like, it used to be one. And so there's all these people, and we send out the announcement and like the seats just get filled, within a couple of hours. And you've been on some of these calls and you know what they're like. And so eventually, I mean, this is 8 years ago that we started doing this. Eventually we had so many stories that we said, we got to write a book. And so we wrote a book, and it's called Memos from the Head Office.
Yeah, the book is very inspiring. I read when my husband's driving, because his driving makes me nervous. And yes. So otherwise I would be sitting there going, you're turning here. You're getting off, right? So instead I read. And usually I read a business book and I start reading it and then I get bored or I leave it. And, your book, I continued reading it the entire time. We got done with our drive. I continued reading. I finished. It's the first book I've actually read the entire book at one time. So I really loved it. It's very inspiring. Well,
thank you. I think people, one time I was doing a meeting in Ireland, actually, and a guy from Scotland came up to me and he goes, Perry, I read your Vivian story, it's in the 80/20 book. It's also in this book, but he had read it in another book. And he goes, he started tearing up. And he goes, when I was a kid, we used to like move in that world. And I got older and I got sophisticated and I lost touch with it. And I didn't believe it anymore. He goes, I read that story and it regrounded me. He goes, all this, I was really like, oh yeah, I'm not alone. And like it had such an effect on him, just one story, because, not everybody's ready to hear it. But if you're dialed in and you're self-aware you understand, if one of these stories is true, then the whole world is different than what everybody tells you it is.
Yeah,
And it
exactly.
only takes one, right?
Yeah.
And I know, look, I know people abuse this stuff. I know some of it's fake. I know there's charlatans and everything. Yeah, of course. Just like in any business anywhere. You know, there's con artists in real estate, and there's real deals in real estate. And there's con artists in investing, and there's real people investing. And there's con artists in marketing, and there's real experts in marketing, right? And this is just like that. And if you can dial in to the trustworthy people, it's a whole other world.
Yeah. And can people do their own listening? Do you have some suggestions?
Yes, yes. When I discovered this, I was mystified, and I was like, how do they do that? I couldn't help but start asking, like, well, can anybody do that? Well, I have definitely have an answer to that. It's kind of like accounting. Can anybody do accounting? Of course.
Do they want to?
Well,
No.
well, so let's nuance this a little bit.
Okay.
Anybody who could do arithmetic could balance a checkbook or something, okay? And there isn't anybody who should say, oh, I could never balance a checkbook, or, okay, that doesn't mean you're the same as an accountant. Like, I used to know a guy who was the director of taxes at Amico. Like, it doesn't mean you have to be that guy.
Yeah.
But here's what it does mean. It means everybody can do it to a degree. And it also means some people are very gifted, and some people exercise the gift and work the muscle and turn it into a finely tuned instrument.
Mhm.
Okay. And what I want everybody to know is, first of all, you can hear just like anybody can add and subtract. Anybody can hear from the head office. Anybody. Okay. And nobody is exempt unless they want to be. Now, if you're closed off, you won't get it. Okay. I also want people to know that there's a path you can get on to develop your listening ear. And the simplest way that I know how to do this is in the morning, right when you get out of bed. Do not turn on CNN. Do not scroll through Facebook. Do not start texting people. Do not check your email. Go get yourself a pen and a piece of paper and write.
Mhm.
Write what? Okay, do not compose, just listen and start. It can be gibberish. It's fine. Like, I had a dream last night. Okay, write down the dream. Or, oh, it was really fun pushing my nephew on the swing. So you write about that. And you start asking questions, and you start listening, and you just listen. And what that will be like for most people, it will be like going into a house that's been sitting empty for a year and turning on the water. Nothing. And then, right? And then gurgle, right? And eventually, after some period of time, you'll actually get a steady flow of water, and it'll be brown, and there'll be rusty stuff in it, and then it'll be pure. That is exactly what it's like. And I can't tell you it'll take you a day, a week, a month, a year. I don't know. Okay. But what I know is that if you're listening and if you're open, you're like, okay, I'm here, I'm switched on. What do you got to say?
Mhm.
Okay. And I don't even think you have to be entirely sure who or what you're listening to. Okay. And this is why I called it memos from the head office, not, messages from God or something like that. I'm a Christian, and there's an appendix in the book, and I get into some of that, and you can read about that. But I know that the head office can talk to anybody, especially if they're willing to listen. And so it's about putting yourself in that posture, because it's a whole different way of living your life if you're living your life as a listener who's tuned in, as opposed to somebody who thinks you have to figure it out all for yourself. You don't have to figure it out all yourself.
Yeah. And do you think there are some places, like I love to go to Sedona, and I have a special place in Sedona, and the minute I sit down in that space, I start hearing all sorts of things. And
Yeah.
so are there spaces like that?
Yes, those are called thin places. And I didn't have language for that for a long time. And I didn't really have a grid for that. But like, for example, I remember going into the Notre Dame Cathedral in Montreal. And it's gorgeous. But I've been in lots of gorgeous cathedrals. But I walked in that building and I felt it.
Yeah. The
space has been cultivated here. There is no question about it. I can feel the electricity. I have the same experience every time I go to Western Ireland. Okay. And there's reasons why these places are like this, which we don't have time to go into. But one of the best ways to accelerate is thin places. There's a coffee shop that's owned by a church a mile down the road here. And I remember the first time I walked in the front door, I was not thinking about this. I was not expecting this. I felt something. The moment I walked in the door, I was like, somebody cultivated the Holy Spirit here. I can tell.
Yeah.
Okay. And like, I'm describing something, like some listeners would go, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Other people like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Right.
If you're the what are you talking about person, I promise you it's possible to cultivate the sense and to pick it up. Yeah. And when you cultivate that sense, you move in the world differently. When the cover designer of the book, he hadn't read the book, and he was like, okay, you need a book cover. Can you explain what this book is about? And I said, well, did you ever hear stories like in 9/11? There was an unusual number of people who had a feeling they shouldn't go into work that day, and they didn't for some weird reason. And then the building blew up. And he goes, yes, I know one of those people, actually. I said, that's what this book is about.
Yeah. Yeah. And for entrepreneurs, sometimes we feel we're so in our mind and we feel like we're here all alone trying to figure out everything. We got to do this, we got to do this. And instead, if we would just relax and let the messages come.
Yes, inspiration never comes when your fists are clenched. Yeah, and so you need to slow down to speed up.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you've got one of those days when everything's coming at you like machine gun fire, and it's the 26th of the month and I got to meet payroll, you know what you do? Your natural tendency is, okay, I'm going to bang faster on my keyboard and I'm going to make more phone calls and I'm going to speak. Like, no, actually, you close your computer, you walk out of the house, you go to the park and you sit on the park bench and you make yourself calm down and you make yourself listen. Yeah. Until you finally get into that slower groove. Yeah. And it's amazing how consistently that causes all of the chaos to start to order itself. Yeah. Yeah. That can happen when you take a walk in the yes.
So our time is kind of coming to an end, and I want to make sure I get to, I always ask everybody on this podcast with me, three traits that you think people need to have in order to soar to success in their business. So can you name 3 characteristics or traits or whatever you want to refer to them as?
One is equanimity.
Okay, what's that?
What is that? That's a 25-cent word. That is being able to be peaceful and calm in chaos. Okay. Or even injustice. This isn't fair. This is ridiculous. Okay. Like my spirit, my soul is bigger than this outrage. Okay. Which that may be one of the most necessary traits at the moment with the politicization and social media and the media the way it is.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one is discernment.
Okay.
Discernment is seeing around the corner. Discernment is making out the outlines of something that you can't possibly see, but knowing anyway. And wisdom is knowing how to use knowledge, which is not knowledge itself. Like wisdom is not formulaic. Wisdom is unformulaic knowledge.
Yeah.
Equanimity, discernment, wisdom.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, how can people find out more about the book and find out more about you and how they can get a memo?
Go to perrymarshall.com/memos. You will get 3 free chapters of the book. And you will also get on our list, we have a notification list, and every month or so, we do publicly available memos for a donation of any size. Like it could be $1, it could be whatever, but we send out that list. And if you get in before it's filled up, then you get a chance. perrymarshall.com/memos, it'll get you all that stuff.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for bringing this to the world. It's really so needed right now. And I just absolutely am enthralled with it. Thanks.
Well, Pat, thank you for supporting the book, because I can't do this by myself. And it really means a lot that you're telling people about this. Thank you.
Yes, my pleasure. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right.
Okay. Yep. So I'm going to stop the recording here. Well, I'm going to end the meeting because you got to go. But I'll be in touch with your Lorena, is it, to get the images and things, because we'll write a feature article about this.
That is fabulous. Thank you so much.
Go in the magazine. So, okay.
Okay. Love to see it. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. All right. See ya. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Soar to Success podcast. For more insights into growing your business or improving your quality of life, visit soartosuccessmagazine.com and subscribe to the Soar to Success podcast on iTunes.